So yeah, first of all, thank you, Lynn, for the invitation on speaking here tonight. It's a great honor for us to do so. And with this presentation, I'll be hoping to give you a bit of an insight into how we as a company experience the smart home market here in Belgium, because we know that maybe with a little bit of background, Homemade is a company that me and my co-founder Gauthier, who's not here with us today, we founded it. That's nearly 3 years ago now. And we founded it during our studies when we were looking into the smart home market in Belgium. When we were doing so, we found that back in 2019, when we were doing the research, there were actually some market pains that we experienced across many clients that we thought could be solved in a better and more efficient way. So first of all, there were too many systems, as you can see on the illustration I brought up here. Every singular app on that phone is an ecosystem of a certain smart home brand. So there are many systems that work side by side, which resulted in the fact that clients that wanted a smart home have a very spread out control over their system. And well, it's not convenient for them to use. Definitely the people that are not so involved in tech and that are not so top of mind on tech, they find it complicated, and that's why they stay away from it. On top of that, there is here in Belgium, there's two big groups of systems. There is the wired ones, which we actually call domotics, and then there is the wireless ones, which you all know as Google Home, as Philips Hue. That's the wireless solutions. Those are more the smart home solutions. But the problem is that those two systems, the wired and the wireless, they didn't match with each other. So when you wanted to build a future-proof house, you choose for a wired system at first when you're building the home, but when then maybe 5 years later you want to expand upon that, that's already a problem because the wireless systems did not communicate with the wired systems. On top of that, here in Belgium right now, we have somewhat of an ongoing energy crisis, being that since 2020, the price of electricity has more than tripled for the average home. So everybody in the market is kind of looking for a way to reduce energy costs. Now, the systems that are on the market today, and there is plenty of them here in Belgium, they are mainly energy monitoring systems, which means they only allow you to get an insight in the energy usage, maybe the gas usage or the electricity usage, but they do not allow you to actively go and manage your electricity. Now, since I've made this presentation in 2019, there has actually been some development, and there now exist a couple of systems that actually do allow you to manage the electricity. So that's definitely something we've seen over the past 3 years, is that there is a lot of development in energy management in smart homes. So definitely when we go into the sale of a smart home, it's unthinkable that energy will not be spoken about. It's one of the first things the client brings up with us right now, and that's why we have to provide an answer that our system will be able to manage their electricity. And on top of that, as I said, all the apps are spread out, and nothing of different brands actually is compatible with each other. So with a switch from a certain brand, you can't maybe turn on a light from a different brand. And that's also a problem because for the same reason, people buy different things at different times and they want them all to be compatible. So from those problems in 2019, that's why me and my colleague looked at it and we thought, there must be a better way to do this right now. And so that's exactly what we did. So we created 10,000 devices at the push of a button. Essentially, all the interfaces that I showed you guys previously have some sort of API, which means that through software, they can be interfaced with. And so what we did is there is an open source software here that allows us to do this. We built bridges, software bridges, between all these different ecosystems, and now we let them come together through one singular app. So first of all, for our clients, the complexity of the total system is now much less because when they want to turn on their lights, it's one app. When they want to look at the energy, it's the same app. When they want to turn down maybe their windows or their screens, same app. So first of all, that's one of the biggest problems that we've solved is that we've made it more simple, more accessible. I mean, we feel that our clients actually enjoy the fact that it's one interface, one app. They don't have to worry about compatibility. Everything will be integratable through this singular system. So if we sum that up, which means we build wireless smart homes to the needs of our customers to make smart homes accessible and affordable to everyone. And that's really the mission of Homemade, is making smart homes accessible and affordable for everyone. So in order to do that, we have to have a 100% wireless system. So I don't know if you guys how familiar you are with the smart home market, but there is two major protocols used here, and that's Zigbee and Z-Wave. Both of those are actively used in our system. We are now currently looking at the new protocol that will enter the market called Matter, which is something developed by Google, by Amazon, I believe, which will be a third major wireless protocol, which we hope will bring some standard in the industry, because as of right now, that's absolutely what we're lacking. We're lacking a decent standard in communication for smart devices. So 100% wireless system that can actually combine nearly 2,000 brands into a singular interface. And now you can take that very, very broadly. That means every aspect of the smart home has to be accessible through one singular device. That means the lights, that means maybe access control, maybe the door, the video unit at the front door has to be accessible, heating control has to be integrated, blinds, audio, everything has to really be in that singular interface in order to make it simple enough for the median Belgian customer that will be buying this product. So as I said, that's our controller, which is actually a PCB device. You can see on the slides right now. And that builds the bridges between all the smart home ecosystems and protocols. So we're not really a product company, we're more of a solutions provider in the market, where we have clients coming in, they tell us that we look at their building plans together and we figure out a way to make their home or their future home a real smart home. And so that really brings us right here in the smart home of the future is what we try to sell to people. And we see that maybe 80% of our revenue is generated here. 80% of our revenue is generated in the individuals market, where there are young couples that are building a house and they want to have smart home features, but they don't know where to get started. So that's really where they come from for us. So we try to make it as wireless as possible. So that also makes it cheaper because they save on electrical work, which means that it's also fit for renovations. Here in Belgium, we have a very large market for renovations. That means in the bigger cities, the buildings that will not be torn down because of structural reasons, they will be renovated. That's maybe more difficult for cables to install new cables. That's where the wireless system really expresses itself better than the wired solutions. On top of that, of course, it has to bring comfort in the home. That's one thing, and it also has to have, and that's really a big part right now, it has to have an energy management system. So the way we view that energy management system is it works actually based on the 80-20 rule, which means 80% of the energy usage is caused by 20% of the devices in the house, which means the biggest loads for a smart home are usually the heating pump, which is nearly a standard in all new homes here in Belgium. And on top of that, of course, the EV station for maybe the electric vehicle. So just those two energy consumers make up nearly 80% of the yearly energy costs. So if we can actively manage those, we can actively reduce the energy bill at the end of the month for our customers. And people are really looking for that. Definitely if the energy price has tripled in the past 2 years, people are actively looking for that. So as I said, it's only about 80% of our revenue that is generated in this part. We also see a big transition in the community building sites, where there is big project developers such as Revive coming to us. Revive is a big company here in Belgium that provides living solutions on a larger scale, and they kind of want to house living as a service. It's their new business model where they are looking into a monthly fee, a monthly fixed fee, where you can have a house and also all the utilities. So that means for that fixed fee, there is also included electricity, gas, water, and so on. So what that means is they take a certain amount of energy and include it in the monthly billing. So what really is important for them is that we can actively monitor all those utilities so they can, at the end of the month, if they've exceeded their bills, make sure that everything is accordingly paid. So also there is a lot of activity in the smart home market here in Belgium, where we see project developers really making their building smart and really building a community around the site that they are building on. So that includes things like car sharing, bike sharing, maybe shared workspaces or shared utilities such as washing machines. They are now becoming a bit more of, it's not yet a standard, but we see definitely certain project developers going in that direction and really making their sites into a nice community that everyone can live ecologically, but also economically more more normal. So at the end of the day, whether it be in our individual market or in our project developer market, we really offer the all-in-one solution, and that's something that really recurs for us for every single project, is that people don't want multiple parties to be interfacing with all these projects because it adds complexity. They just want someone to provide the all-in-one solution, and that's really where we've positioned Homemade into doing the all-in-one solution, meaning that we get involved in thinking the project phase. We think out everything how it should be done. Then we get involved in the installation. We make sure that every installation is done right and accordingly as we have foreseen it. And then after, we get involved in programmation and service. So if something goes wrong, they call us and we make sure that it gets fixed. And we really find out that that's something of a huge added value for our clients here in Belgium. So Homemade is a really small company. So it's as of right now, it's me and Gauthier who are running it. We founded it together 2 years ago, and we are currently working with 4 people in order to realize the growth, as you can see on the scale here. We plan to realize nearly $3 million in the next 3 years. So that means we're going to triple next year and double it again the year after. So we're a rather small company, but I believe that the flexibility that it gives us is also one of our major advantages, because the larger competitors that we have in the market, they have already aligned their business model on the fact that they have their own products which they need to sell in order to make their business profitable. Where we as a small player have the luxury that we can kind of tweak our business model as we go along, and we'd be a lot more flexible towards those bigger players such as Revive that are really looking for a tailor-made solution that our competitors cannot provide right now. So yeah, the people behind it, as I said, it's me and Gauthier. We both founded it nearly 3 years ago. So we have about combined 8 years experience in automation, where we try to take our past in industrial automation and kind of extrapolate that onto the residential market. So we really have to look into making the system like industrially stable enough, but it has to be it has to be payable by the residential client. It has to make sense in an economic standpoint as well. So yeah, I hope you guys really learned something here, and I really am open to questions. So if you have anything that comes up, please do ask away, and I'll try to answer that accordingly.
Anyway, I propose to start my presentation as well. Just before I start, a little bit of background on myself. So unlike Seppe, I'm not someone that is still currently in the home automation sector. I am an entrepreneur though, so I have my own company called Deliveract, which is actually doing things for, it's making software for the hospitality industry. So we help people with delivery. Second startup have been growing very rapidly in Belgium. So I know quite a bit about starting companies, and it's actually one of the things that I was interested in the past. I almost started something on home automation side as well, because when I studied, I did my dissertation about home automation. And so I'll start my presentation there, and this was actually more than 20 years ago. And so as you can imagine, technology was quite different. And so the first thing you see, I made a few slides, but just to help a bit, it's more a bit few pictures to make some things more concrete. But this was the X10 system, as it was called then. And X10 was a protocol that worked. It was not wireless, but it worked over your existing power lines. So it somehow used the existing power lines to communicate. And so everywhere where you wanted something to happen, you needed one of these clunky devices. But it was one of the only things that it wasn't open source, but at least their protocol was available. So when you wanted to do things that were outside of using, a simple app or a simple program thing, that if one sensor detected motion, so another lamp went on, you again needed software and you needed to write it yourself. But here it was possible. But outside of these things, in the past, the main things you had a long time ago were bus systems. And Seppe has talked a little bit about that as well. But bus systems are quite nice and versatile. They've existed for a long time. Then the downside, though, is that you kind of only do that when you build your house. And so when you haven't thought about home automation, when you're building your house, or you're moving to an apartment or something else, it becomes very, very hard to put these systems there. But they are very reliable, right? And the nice thing is the buttons you have in your house, all the switches, most of the time you can also program them. So if you suddenly think like, this switch, I don't want it to turn on this lamp, it has to be that lamp, or I want to turn on 5 different things, a bus system allows things like that. And you have actually newer ones as well. And actually, normally one of the speakers was going to be from OpenBotics. I really like the system they have, and basically similar to Connex, quite open. It's a Belgian startup as well. And so again, everything of your home automation is then where you have your electricity. You have all these modules, and every lamp that you want automated is connected to this system. Every input, every switch that you have is connected to this system, but also some power sockets can be connected to these systems. Now, like I said, all this existed for a long time, but suddenly there were certain companies that were able to, bridge the gap and make things wireless, but also easy, so that consumers suddenly were enticed and were like, okay, home automation, it's not just for people that know a lot about it. I can now do this myself. And one of the first that was very successful at this was Philips with their Hue light bulbs. And so even though here you still needed this device that you see on the left, and this was actually a device that speaks Wi-Fi, but at the same time, it also spoke Z-Wave or Zigbee. I'm not sure anymore which one of the two it was. But so these lamps, they don't speak Wi-Fi, but when you wanted something to happen, like your smartphone could send something to this device on the left, and it would then communicate to your lamp. And it's very easy. No wires, nothing else needed. You just plug in the lamp in the existing socket, and you suddenly had a smart light, and you could even turn the colors. So very simple product. It was very, very successful. Other products that or quite recent, but that really have taken the market by storm, or like smart thermostats. And again, like Nest is a nice example of this. Looked very nice. So a lot of people, you know, started to think like, okay, smart devices, it's something for me. And I'll give I'll go over a lot of devices that exist a little bit later, but I want to show where we come from. So you have this old world, then you have some of these new companies that started to do things. But now recently, you also have the very big players that started to join the fray. And that's actually, I think, why nowadays so many companies are doing things, because even these guys have thrown a lot of money and innovation and software at the home automation problem. And so on the left, you can see Google with their Home Assistant, but they also bought Nest. And so they have quite some smart home devices as well. You have Alexa from Amazon, and you have Siri from Apple. So three very big companies that are in this, fighting for dominance as well. And the nice thing, I think, here is that these companies have allowed people to also use their voice. And in the past, a lot of people thought home automation is something where you have an app on your phone and you can, do something with a device. But in my opinion, that is not home automation. Home automation is about making it as easy as possible for some things to preferably happen automatically or with the least amount of effort. And if you sit somewhere or you have your hands full and you want something to happen, if you need to take your phone, it might actually take more time than that you press a button. But these devices allow you to just say, hey, Google or something, and then you can immediately turn on a lamp or whatever, else that you can program or configure to do. And I'll go a bit more in detail of some of these things later. But so they really have made a big difference. And this company that I think most of you will all know, Xiaomi, I think has also made a huge difference, because unlike some of the other companies like Philips you saw, not just have they innovated a lot in this space, and they did a lot of things that were not just about lights. You can see here already some of the examples, but they have a huge amount of different devices. But the quality that they had and the price point is actually something that made it very, very interesting for a lot of people to suddenly look at these. Because if you looked at Philips Hue, I honestly don't know the current prices, but I think in the past it was easily for one lamp, or for a set of three, I think you paid easily almost €100, especially if you needed that bridge also, which is actually a lot of money. And like with Xiaomi, there were a lot of lamps that you could have for maybe 10, 12 euros. So the difference in price was quite big, but actually the utility and what you had out of it was very, very similar. But as Seppe actually also told, all these things, all these companies starting to arise, it means that you have a lot of different protocols, a lot of different standards. It's a very, very fragmented space. So once you start to think like, I want a lamp, you see something, okay, maybe you want garden lights, it will again be another company that makes them. And then you have two apps, and indeed, if you then want a sensor that sees you pass somewhere to turn on your garden lights, they might not be compatible. So that is actually a very, very big problem. And there has been some software that solved this. One example that you see here is OpenHab. It's their interface, but it's an open source software. So the downside is, to install this, well, first of all, you need to be a little bit technical. I'm not saying super technical, but at least you need to know how to install things on a computer. And since you don't want to run a big computer all the time, Like ideally, you buy like a small, inexpensive computer that is in your network, that is always on. So you need to know a bit of networking, and then you need to be able to install each of these different protocols. It's quite easy. They have a kind of a marketplace where you say, okay, if you say I have Philips Hue, you click Philips Hue, it is installed, and normally it detects your devices. But setting all this up, again, if you're completely not technical, it's not that easy, but it actually allows you to connect with whatever you want. And then you see you have pretty nice user interface. It can run on any device that you want. Another one is Home Assistant. I don't know what actually HomeMate is using, but probably one of these two. There are some other ones as well out there, but these are two popular ones. If you're technical yourself and you want to experiment, I would say definitely have a look. And as I said, home automation is all about automating things. And here you see that even without being really a developer, they have some things that allow you to easily do some rules, they call it. And what is a rule? A rule is something happens, an event happens. Let's say there's motion detected something, and then you will do something. So if this happens, then that item should change. The light should turn on, it should change color, or if it's a other detector, maybe the temperature goes below a certain degrees, you will turn on the heating. All these things you can then start to program. And that's when it really becomes interesting, because that's how you can make your life much easier, but that's also how you can save energy or other things, because it's not because suddenly you have an app that you will turn on your devices when you go away. You could also now just plug them out. The problem is people forget, or they don't want to do that because it's annoying. And so these systems allow you to configure these things, and you can go way more crazy than this. This is a visual interface. If you're a developer, there's a lot more possible, and I will give you some explanations of things you can do later in the presentation. But if you look at this, for many people, they will already be like, this is not that user friendly. And so if you're technical, you're thinking, okay, I can do a lot with this. If you're not, then you'll be like, okay, this is all nice, but it's not for me. And luckily, we start to see that some of the companies like Google, they have started to solve these things a bit, and they're bringing the automation part of it more towards consumers in easier and easier ways. But if even that is too difficult, you will need to work indeed with companies like HomeMate or others in this space so that they can actually automate all these things for you the way you want it. Another thing that's quite easy that some people might have experimented with is if this, then that. So the website is called IFTTT. If you don't know it, feel free to go to it. It's actually also a kind of makes rules. And so, but the downside is it only works with smart devices that are connected with cloud services. So if you do have these devices and you don't mind about the downsides, like I said, a service like this has a very easy way to make some rules that actually will allow you to do some, more advanced rules to really make a lot of things practical. You see some examples here, but they have a lot of examples that you can search. So you don't need to program anything. You just search. If you have an idea, I would like to do this. Probably it already exists, and they can help you with it. Now, this is my last slide, but I'll go over a lot of other things later. But it was already touched on a bit as well, and I think it's very nice to see that finally there's a standard arising that should help with interoperability. I am still a bit skeptical because most of the times what happens is a company says there's too many standards, so they create an extra standard, and then instead of n standards, you have n+1 standards. And so it rarely solves the problem, because it's not about having a standard. Z-Wave, Zigbee, Bluetooth, you know, all these are standards, but not every device is using the same thing. And so a lot of companies will always develop proprietary protocols, because they want to be the only one. They want to be the biggest one that sells you their hardware and software. But the nice thing about Matter is a lot of the big players are already using it. So I told you before, you know, about Google, I told you about Amazon, I told you about Apple, but even Samsung, even Xiaomi, like all these big players have committed and said that they would start to use Matter. And so the nice thing is that when you see this logo and you buy something with this logo, it will not matter who it is from. It means that those devices should, in theory, be able to speak with each other. And that's where, again, it becomes interesting. So I will go over a few devices, and then I'll end with some of the rules that you could make if you have all these devices. And so the simple ones we already touched are lights, right? You have your standard lights. In your house, you have dimmable lights, you have colored lights, you also have lights outside, like I already said, like in your garden and so on. And there's many inexpensive varieties, some that are quite cheap and good, or My Light. They use something similar to Wi-Fi. It's not really the same, but again, with a small gateway, you can normally connect them to the rest of your systems and control them. So pretty cool to have. Another thing is power sockets. So why would you want your power sockets to be able to turn it on or off? Well, there's many devices that use power and that are not smart. And so if you have, for instance, a big old lamp, you know, if you can turn off the power and it's always on, it will go off. Even when the switch is on, and then you turn on the power, it goes on again. But that same device could save energy when all your, like when your TV is on it, when your audio system is on it, all these things in one time, you could just turn off when you go away. And when you're in the house again, you can turn it on again. So can be quite interesting to have something like that. And most of the time, it doesn't just turn on or off, but it can also measure the power usage, which becomes very interesting. I even use it for my bike. So when I charge my bike, actually it's not good for the battery when you keep charging something. And because I have an intelligent power socket, I will turn it off automatically when it has charged an hour, because I know that is enough for me to charge it enough so that the next day, you know, I can again cycle to work with my electric bike, and I will have used less electricity, and it will be better for the battery, so it will work for much longer. Another thing is blinds and curtains. So these can also be automated. Someone spoke already about Somfy. There's quite a few brands that support this. Most of them use RF technology. So again, something different. But luckily, there's again, and I can maybe see if I can still mail it. I forgot the name by heart. But there's again a device, a kind of a hub you can buy. And if you have that one, it can speak RF, right? And so it speaks with all RF devices. So you buy one of this, you can again connect it to your PC or OpenHub, and then you can actually speak to all old RF devices that exist. So even though you might think like, okay, I can now buy maybe in future something that is Matter compatible, that's great. But if you already have existing Somfy blinds, it would still be nice. You don't need to use the remote, but that you can actually connect it to your existing system. And so OpenHub and others will allow you to do that, but you will need a small extra device that speaks RF with your blinds and so on. Another thing that we haven't touched is like old music or TV or hi-fi sets, all these things, they normally use infrared. So again, here, if you want to use that, you can actually buy some small piece of hardware that speaks IR. So then it will send the IR signal. So you can one time press the button on your IR remote, like for instance of your TV, the on button, you can record it and then you can replay it later. This way, all your old devices that you have that were not smart, you can make them smart now, which allows, again, many interesting things. Like for instance, in my house, because I have all of this connected, I can ask the Google speaker, you know, to say, I want to watch some movie, and automatically the blinds will go down, the lights will be dimmed, the projector screen goes down, the projector turns on, and then I just need to, and my music turns on, my boxes, and all I need to say then is what movie I want to watch, and it just starts playing. So all of this, I don't need to take any device out of my pocket. It just works like that. So pretty cool to be able to use that. One of those IR hubs is, for instance, Orvibo alone, All One. But I think there's some other ones nowadays that are better options. Maybe again afterwards, I can still send some of these devices if people are interested to buy them. The cool thing is we even have like these cheap candles that now work like on, yeah, I think you can buy them in the Action. They are like, they look like real candles. They work with a small LED light, and they even move a little bit. While those, some of them, you can turn them on remotely, again with a remote, while that remote uses IR. So again, you can actually then say, turn on my candles, and all your candles go on in your house. So pretty fun thing to do, and if you have a lot of these, much easier than doing it one by one. Another thing is actually there's more and more robots. I don't know how many people have a robot of themselves, but so the main ones that most people might already have are the ones for vacuuming. So instead of buying a vacuumer, you can now buy these devices that they map your house, they know where to go automatically, and they just keep your house clean on a certain schedule. But a lot of them are, again, also smart, so you can just tell them, you know, clean now, and they will just start cleaning. I can even tell them to say like that I want to clean them after they're finished, and they will actually go to my to where my garbage is, so that when I open it, I can just take the dust out of it and put it in. So I don't even need to search where the device is, somewhere hidden where I have it, you know, located normally. Very easy to clean. A lot of these robots now don't just have vacuum option, they even have a mop option. So very, very practical. Also, if you get older and you don't want to do all these chores, very, very easy. Similar to one for in the house, you have outside of the house, you have robots for your grass. And similarly, a lot of those are now smart, so you can actually control when you want them to mow the grass. And then you can, once you know again a little bit about technology, you could not just do it at a certain time. You could say if it's not raining and it hasn't been very dry for a long time, I will let it go at a certain hour. But if it has been very dry, it's actually not good for your grass for it to be cut. So all these things you could theoretically automate. Apart from these robots, you also have some for windows, not yet very common, and you need to have big windows for them to be useful, but pretty cool that now instead of washing your windows yourself, you can actually also do it with robots. And you can, if you have a pool, you can actually have robots there as well that you can control. Then the next type of smart devices is for HVAC. So anything that has to do with your heating or air conditioning, all these you can also control. And again, why would you want to do that? Well, if you have the right sensors, you can automatically turn them on when you want, but maybe not when you're not in the house, or when your smartphone knows you're on the way to your house. You can make sure that by the time you're at home, that your apartment or your house already has, you know, the right temperature, thus saving time. And even if you're going to be 2 hours later from work, it will know, because your phone might send a trigger to say like, okay, you're now in your car and you're driving towards home. So very cool options there as well to save some money. Another thing that can be very easy is valves that are smart for instance, irrigation, water valves. So if you have a garden and you forget often in the summer to give, water, again, it's something where you now have smart variants that if you send the right signal, they can turn on sprinklers or other things in your garden to automatically water plants. Then it also brings us to doorbells and door locks. So very handy feature. Smart doorbells allow you to see who is at your house. On your phone, for instance, you get a notification even when you're not at home, and you can broadcast it through your house. So if you have a big house or you're maybe in your garden or somewhere else, you will still know someone is at your door, and you can even in some cases remotely open your door. Up to you to see if you trust the companies enough with actually allowing your house to be opened, because if it's hacked, there is of course some security risk, but very handy systems all the same. And it's often also used by companies or others, if they have if they have like a small hallway, you could let people go in that have a package, leave it there in your house, close the main door, but have another door that you can keep locked to make sure that things remain secure. And it actually also brings us to cameras, because these devices that I spoke about, those doorbells, they have a camera, but there's also normal cameras. And they've been around for a long time, but very handy if you want some extra security. Plus, they can also double up as motion sensors, because most of the current cameras are smart enough to detect variations, and they can actually sense the difference between humans and, for instance, pets. If it's if it's a dog or a cat, they will not trigger a certain motion. If it's a human, they will. So quite handy again to use in some of the automations that might be interesting. And then other things that I haven't yet talked a lot about, but are sensors. So very important when you want to do automations. So what type of sensors do you have? Well, I spoke about motion. But there's also temperature sensors. There's power sensors that measure how much power you use, which you can then in turn, combine with, for instance, if you have a Tesla or a smart battery or whatever, can be very interesting combination, because you might, depending on how much power you use and how much power you generate from your solar panels, you might actually change when you charge your battery or your electric car, so that actually you don't have to give power back to the net. And so this way you can actually save quite a bit of money, especially if you have a digital meter that no longer runs backwards. So I don't know if everyone knows, but in Belgium, in the near future, everyone will be forced to use a digital meter. Try to avoid it as long as possible if you have solar panels, because the moment you have the extra energy you generate, it will no longer go backwards. So you will no longer get money actually for the power you put back on, or whatever you get will be way less than what you pay. So very good then to try to use all the power you have. So when there's a lot of sun, that's when you should try to charge the battery or your electric car. Or maybe at night when the electricity costs are lower, so you can program all these things to make a big difference. You can also have sensors for how much gas you use, whether there's water or not. Water sensor can be very good for detecting also certain leaks, or maybe you forgot, the crane in your bathroom, the faucet, so if you want to detect problems with that, very nice to have an alarm. Also, light sensors can be very handy if it's dark, that certain lights go on, or maybe your blinds go up or other things. So sensors are very important to actually do something with all these smart devices that you have, so that you don't need to have to press a button yourself. Finally, some of the last devices, or some things that are less common, but you start to see more and more of these devices become smart as well. For instance, washing machine that can tell you when it's finished washing, an oven that tells you when your dish is ready, water cookers that you can turn on remotely, or maybe If you know you always drink some tea in the morning, you could make sure when your alarm wakes you up, maybe your alarm doesn't wake you up with a sound. It actually, you say at 8, I want to wake up, and 5 minutes before 8, your curtains start to go slowly open so that the sun naturally wakes you up with a safety, maybe 5 minutes later, that there's still a real alarm, but it's a nice way to wake up. And by the time you're downstairs, your water will already be warm for your tea that you want to drink. So pretty cool things you can do. Finally, you have your normal PC and a car. You can, of course, also with most of the new ones, you can see a lot of statistics or turn on your PC or run the software needed, like I said before, to be able to do different things. So what are some of the automations that we have, for instance, or that are cool for you to experiment with if you have a lot of these devices? Well, the simplest is, of course, a simple motion is detected, light goes on, right? Very easy to do. And again, you don't need to be an expert. And if you have, for instance, Google Home or one of these others, it will be very easy if you have a motion detector to say, if there's motion here, turn on this lamp. Very handy, for instance, in a toilet or certain other places where you just know once you enter that room, the light needs to go on. But you can go very much more complex. So I already said in the morning, you know, when the sun comes up, you might, for instance, want to turn your blinds on, you know, to 50% maybe, because when you're downstairs, you know, you want to have a bit of light, maybe not yet fully, or you want a bit of privacy still, but you want already to see some light. And why would you not always leave them at 50%? Well, in the winter, when it's down and the sun is not yet there, it will actually help with isolation. So that's why you would automate it like that. And so knowing when the sun goes up is something that's easy for software, and it can then trigger something that happens like, you know, controlling your blinds. Another thing is, for instance, when your door is open and it's maybe your garage door or your side door or something else, you could actually set things up that you know that that door is open because of a door sensor. And when you leave your house, or the system knows there is no more smartphones of the people that live there in the house, you automatically get a message that tells you that you left your door open. So helps a lot with safety. Or even if you're in the house, but you're not in that room, you could configure it in a way so that you know someone has entered your house, so that you can never be surprised someone enters without you knowing. You have door sensors, you have sensors also for your windows, so it can be very handy for security. At our house also, I spoke about this, but when someone rings the door, it actually is broadcasted through our whole house. So because, you know, when I'm sitting upstairs in a certain room, I might not hear the door, but right now it's broadcasted, and I even can detect if it's someone I know, it can say that, or if it's kids or something else, it can detect at least, you know, if it's a bunch of kids in front of the door or someone trying to sell me or someone that I know. So very handy. And then, for instance, when I go out of the house, there is one light button, one switch that would normally control a light. But for me, when I click it, all the devices that are not essential get turned off. So all the lights that are not important, but also all the things where I know I'm not going to watch my TV when I'm not at home, I'm not going to listen to music. So all those go off, and thus I can save energy. And there's thousands of other things you can automate. I would say if you're interested in this, you probably are, since you're listening to these presentations. It's really, once you dive in, it's fun. It's fun hobby. It's cool what you can do. And don't be too afraid to experiment a little bit with this yourself. There's a lot of things you can find online. And if you do not want to do it yourself, I'm sure Seppe and other people, you know, from similar companies will help you get into the 21st century. Thank you, everybody. I hope you learned something. And if there's any questions, you can let me know.